and 1460 AM Your Talk Radio. We're streaming live at KCNR1460.com, and you can listen to our archive at any time by going to programming, then the archive button, and you can hear us anytime. You can hear our two wonderful guests we have on, Bryan Caples, who is running for the Superintendent of Schools of Shasta County, and Katie Gorman, who's a teacher here in Shasta County. How you two doing?
Great.
Doing
Thanks
excellent.
for having us.
Sure.
Pleasure to be here.
I like your hat.
Thank you. Rocking my Bryan Caples hat.
Ah, very nice. Yeah, very nice. So does that mean that you actually support someone?
Of course, yeah. No, I very much so support Bryan Caples for Superintendent of Schools.
All right. Well, this is going to be an interesting program. And Bryan, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great, Terry. Thanks for asking.
Good. How's your golf game?
It's gotten worse over the last 6 months. Not that it was any good to begin with.
But you've been working hard. I mean, you know, that's the one thing I have to say. The 6 candidates that have been out there, the non-incumbents, the non-establishment, which is so true, the non-good old boy people have really been working hard. And Bryan, what was it that prompted you to run for superintendent of schools? I know you have quite a background. You can give us a little bit of that. But what really prompted you to do it? What was that key spark?
Sure. I've been an educator for 30 years. Several years as a teacher, several years as a principal, and 13 years as a school district superintendent. Also taught higher education for about 15 years total. So I've got a little bit of a background in education. One of the things that really got me interested in this race was, the bottom line is that I really felt that the needs of our kids were not being met. Not only the needs of our kids, but the needs of our teachers and our staff members and the frontline workers in the education field. So that's the reason why I got into it the first time.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Well, initially it was the masking of our kids, right? The masking of our kids, the testing. I think we were all, the first couple weeks of the pandemic, none of us knew really what to think, right? The government's telling us we're all, there's an illness going around, we're all going to die, it's very contagious, et cetera, et cetera. So I think for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks or whatever it was, we were all a little bit leery. Well, after we all realized, okay, it's a really bad flu, it's not something that's going to get the majority of us. It's really detrimental to obviously those that have several comorbidities or overweight or have lung problems and things like that. Realize that it doesn't really affect kids at all. That there's a problem with that. I think that what happened to our kids, the masking, the scare tactics that were used for these kids did much more harm than they did good.
Katie, I think you can elaborate on that point because you're there right on the front lines as a teacher. Elaborate a little bit on what Bryan just said.
Well, when we first shut down back in March, we were devastated. We were scared. We went home. We did our due diligence and only went out when we had to. Came back, disinfected our groceries, all that stuff. Yeah, and I got sick. My husband and I ourselves, we got really sick. But I continued to teach online. We worked really hard. We stayed on the phone for hours on end with my coworkers and I, building a whole new way to teach kids online. It was exhausting. We came back. We were excited about starting school. Shasta County said we were going to. And then, it was Karen Ramstrong, along with Judy Flores and a bunch of other, teams of people, had a bunch of secret meetings. And they threw down what's called the Rancho document, which a lot of us who are really into research had no idea where these protocols were even coming from. And they were keeping it really secret from us. There was a group of moms, they have a Facebook page right now, and they unearthed it for us, got the word out there to as many teachers and parents as possible. And that's one of the things that Judy's touting right now, as if it was a good thing. We only got to open up for 8 days in my district to meet our students, and then we were shut down for months. We were back to distance learning, but this time we had to come to work and our kids couldn't come to school. When they came back, we were all masked over and over again, indoors and outdoors, no toys, no carpet time, nothing. It was horrible. It was the worst school year ever. And it just continued from there. This has been, people forget, and that's why I'm emphasizing this so much, of how horrible this was. This is why it's so easy for Judy to come out and say, I was the champion for the people. No, she wasn't. It was the teachers in my district overwhelmingly voted to open schools, and the parents were at those board meetings advocating for their kids. So Judy changed her tune from 6 feet apart to 3 feet apart, and then again she changed it to 3 feet when possible. So that was because of the parents and the teachers, and not because of Judy.
So Bryan, as superintendent of schools of Shasta County, what would you do to change things up? And how can you jurisdictionally go to bat for the kids, for the teachers? And I know you're a constitutional guy, which is really neat. I know that you understand that, and that's refreshing. Anyway, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think the main thing that I could do in that position would be to advocate. Katie just talked about some of the things that were detrimental to her, and remember, she's teaching 35-year-olds, right? Not 35-year-olds, 35-year-olds, as in kindergartners. And think about what happened to them over there. You know, they're 5 years old, so for 40% of their 5 years, they've had this looming cloud of COVID over them. So it goes much deeper than just what Katie and I are talking about right now. One of the things that really, really bothered me through this thing is there were no advocates for our teachers, for our aides, for our bus drivers, for any staff member that did not want to test, or they didn't feel like it was their right, or they felt it was their right not to have something stuck up their nose or their DNA taken, and they didn't want to do it on the principle of I'm a free man, I'm a free woman, and I believe that I should be able to do what I want to do with my own body. And so what bothered me is you have people in your community that are still going through this. Shasta Union High School District is probably the biggest culprit of this, of trying to fire teachers and aides and staff members for not testing.
And the Shasta County Office of Ed as well have fired people.
Reading School of the Arts and Enterprise Elementary are the other two that are, they just didn't do a good job. They did not protect their people, right? They did not look out for the people that they were in charge of. And that bothers me because as a superintendent, as a principal for all leaders, my job was not only to be a leader, my job was to be a shepherd. My job was to make sure that the needs were met and that they had the tools and the ability and the resources that they could do to do their job well, which is to teach our children.
Do you have anything to do with curriculum? Does your jurisdiction have anything to do with curriculum? And maybe both of you can address that. Because I know the thing with all the crazy liberal stuff we're getting in school, who has jurisdiction over that? Is that the school boards, the school superintendent of the county, or who has that jurisdiction?
The jurisdiction for the County Office of Education would be, remember, most people don't realize this, but the County Office of Education is responsible for a certain population of students. So they serve a certain population of students.
Not all the students?
Directly, I should. Thank you, Wayne. They directly serve a group of students. Your incarcerated youth, Native American kids, special education kids, and a couple other groups of kids. So they're directly responsible to service those particular kids. They are directly responsible for the curriculum for those kids too. Now, as far as the curriculum goes for the community or the other school districts, the school districts are responsible for that.
So it'll be the boards? Could the boards have influence on that?
Oh, absolutely. They would have to adopt it.
Also, in perusing the Ed Code, and I wish that I had, my phone's recording right now to look it up, but there is a provision in the Ed Code for the county superintendent to go through a protocol with the state to also create their own curriculum for the county, and that is a possibility that Bryan could do and look into with his office.
Oh.
Okay, now, I have a quick question too. When you mentioned just a moment ago about the employees, whether they're staff or teachers, being let go from the high school district, what recourse do they have now against the school district for being fired for basically being non-compliant, right? That's why they got fired, because they didn't want to take the jab, they didn't want to be muzzled, and proven to be right, and testing, and they're proven to be right. So what recourse did they have now?
Well, unfortunately, the recourse is to hire an attorney for $300-400 an hour, which probably most of them don't have. One of the things that I've done, I've been to dozens and dozens of school board meetings over the last few months, or last several months, and one of the things that I've told a few of them, especially your school districts that are habitual offenders of this, is that if I was your county superintendent, not only would you have to fight them, you'd have to fight me.
Yeah.
Because if I get in there, when I get in there, and these people are still here, because some of them are still fighting this, it takes a long time to go through the process. we will have our resources that we will help them with. Right? We will, your county office will fight for them, even if your school district won't.
Well, and as they should, because they're being let go for something like that. It's not a performance issue, clearly, according to what we've heard. It's not anything that they've been written up about, or any number of things like that. It's all about the non-compliance with the jab, the testing, and all that kind of stuff and the muzzling. So, I mean, all that stuff you look at, like, that's only something you would do to somebody that's rabid. I mean, how does that work?
Well, what they've done is and I've seen a lot of their paperwork. What they've done is says you're a danger to others. You're putting others in danger, and that's laughable, right? You're not putting anyone in danger because you didn't take a test. Let's face it, a lot of these school districts, people haven't tested in months anyways. They just go through the motions. They're too afraid to say anything. They're too afraid to just stand up and say, no, we're not doing it. Mm-hmm. So they kind of just slowly go under the radar.
There has to be a specific person that actually makes the decision to fire that particular teacher.
So they have a Skelly hearing, is what it's called. They have a hearing of people that they bring that teacher in front of, and basically,
Who makes up that board that does that?
It would be an administrative board. Oh, I'm sorry, not my administrative board.
The administrative board of the school?
No, it would be
on a county level.
right on the county and state level.
So then it would be superintendents, or it would be just staff from SCOE, or what would it be?
I'm not exactly sure who would be directly on it or who
So
actually
normally to fire a teacher, it costs thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This is not something that
hundreds of
happens.
thousands.
Yeah, this is not something that happens easily. And for them to be, and this is costing the school districts themselves.
Gosh. It's costing us. Taxpayer money.
Exactly. It's taking money from your kids to go and take these healthy teachers that are refusing to test because they believe that it is unlawful search and seizure, to go and tell them that they are a danger to others for not doing these testings. So in my district, we're strong. We have every single teacher at this point that's unvaccinated is not testing. They have dropped the whole thing. They don't even talk about it anymore.
Well, there's got to be a reason for that. I guess my point is that we keep talking about lawsuits. This is a travesty. It's costing taxpayer money. It's a danger to our kids. It's taking great teachers out of curriculum. It's just a travesty. Individually, somebody has to be responsible. It's like in the old National Treasure movie, somebody's got to go to prison. And I think that what we need to look at here is who has the jurisdiction over that. That person should be sued and also should be prosecuted under Title 42, 1983, which is obstruction of constitutional rights by someone who is an individual or someone who is using the jurisdiction of an office which they don't have, like this administrative board. I think it's worth digging into.
I agree, but also it's kind of ironic. They're willing to spend thousands or hundreds of thousands
It's
of dollars
$300,000-$400,000.
Oh my gosh.
to fire teachers that are
Is that
doing
for like one or?
to fire.
Oh, that'd be one, and it would take a few years to do it.
Okay.
Most of it's administrative fees and attorney fees is what it is.
Okay, so they're willing to spend that money to fire a teacher who's doing a good job, that's doing all their stuff, but yet they hold on to the troublemakers, the teachers there that aren't teaching, that are flipping, doing the stuff that we all know they do because there's a precursor to
You
university.
have no idea.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm married to a teacher.
Yeah.
I've been
Okay,
for
you
30
know.
some years.
Absolutely.
So I've heard stories and I've met people that are those people, and it just makes me wonder, what in the hell are they doing teaching our kids?
And then
I've often wondered that.
us good teachers are told it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars and thousands. We can't spend the district money to get rid of them, and yet here we are.
Well, okay, a basic thing. Aren't they a right to work position? Isn't that what that is? I mean, I know you have union, but at the same time, if they're doing something wrong, shouldn't it be noted in their file? And if you have 3 strikes, your fanny's out the door. Shouldn't it be as simple as that, like any other position anywhere else? Should be.
From what I understand, the only way to easily get rid of a teacher is a breach of contract, and that's.
But half the
other than
time,
that, no.
the districts aren't honoring their contract with the teachers.
Right.
My wife has worked out of contract for years at the district, several districts that she's worked with. So, I mean, that doesn't hold any water either. I mean, that's so I get what you're saying, but it doesn't hold any water. It's frustrating.
I know.
I mean, are you working in contract now as a teacher?
Yeah.
Okay,
My
that's good.
district's amazing.
That's good. That's good. That's one of the rare ones that does. But the other ones, especially the high schools, they typically are out of contract. So if they can keep working out of contract, who's holding each other accountable? Nobody is. Because the good people are fearful of saying anything, but the bad people take advantage of it. And that's exactly what happens. And that's why I question it. It's like, for the love of God, they're willing to spend that kind of money to get rid of good teachers versus the bad teachers.
It's like they built a crazy amount of red tape and bureaucracy just to protect, the worst of the worst.
Exactly.
And then, go through great lengths to get rid of good teachers with principles and morals.
Well, and then you see, like in the news past couple of years, well, several years ago, there were local teachers, in a district in the south part of the county, was doing things with students that he should never do, and he finally gets fired. So it takes that to happen? It takes that to happen to get fired. I mean, are you
Honestly,
kidding?
it probably only did that because of the news got a hold of it.
Exactly.
People knew what was going on. That's really where I'm
The
at.
embarrassment to the district, so they
Yeah.
finally had to act. It's like, are you kidding?
Yeah, so Bryan,
Sorry, that's just my
Well,
punching bag right there.
A lot of the problem is the education code. Much like
There
you
you
have a penal code, you have an education code. It's a mile thick and a mile wide. And there's a lot of lobbying that goes on to
Oh,
get
I'm
those
sure.
laws in place. And that's really the crux of it. You have to follow the law when unless they just don't want to test, then I guess you don't have to follow the law. But otherwise, you have to follow the law. It's the law. And that's really the crux of it, is that education code it hampers your ability as an administrator to do that. It can be done. But again, it takes years, and I would say now, I'd say $300,000-$400,000 to do it, and that's if you've got a good case.
now you're
right?
talking
That's-
about getting rid of a teacher.
right. That's if you have someone that harms a child or does something that they're not supposed to do. Who knows how long it's going to take, and how much it's going to cost to try to get rid of someone that didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's the thing. You had mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, you had mentioned that part of your job really was to intercede and to stand between any kind of corruption and stand up for the people who work for you, right? And the teachers, the staff, all that stuff. So this fits right in there. I mean, the idea of finding out. I mean, that's the one thing I think we're missing the boat on. Not on everything, but maybe in this one process as far as education goes, as far as what can be done to protect our teachers, our good teachers. Is I think we're not really understanding where we can really go after these people. I think it's sort of a new process for us. How do you go after the person who says, Katie Gorman, you're fired, and here's why, because you won't get a jab, you won't take a test, and you won't wear a mask?
Well, I can tell you who that is. It's the superintendent. The superintendent is the one that would refer that to the school board.
Okay,
For either
of the
termination.
school, yes?
Right, the school district superintendent,
Okay.
yes.
And that superintendent is hired by the school board.
Right, they
For
work.
that particular district.
Yes, they work for the board. The board is elected. Usually there's 5 members of a school board. Sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 7, but generally there's 5. And they hire and fire superintendents. In fact, that's really only one of their 2 main duties. The other duty of a school board is to make policy. So, if a superintendent brings a policy in front of the school board and says, well, we need to fire people that aren't testing or people that aren't following these protocols, and the board adopts it, and they go, well, we have a policy that says so. Well, they're the ones that adopted the policy.
Yeah.
In fact, you're the only ones that adopted the
Right.
policy. They don't ask the public, right? They might have a public comment thing or something. It's usually hidden in there somewhere. So they don't ask teachers what they want. That's one of the things that bothers me the most. As a superintendent and a principal, one of the things, whenever I had to make a big decision, I always made sure that I got input from the staff. And that's something that you have not seen over the last few years. These people have made these decisions without, remember, 98% of the people that are working, if not more, are your teaching and your line level staff. And they were, I don't know if Katie was asked, I never even asked her this, but I guarantee most of them were not.
She's shaking her head no.
I had a lot of good ideas. I would have loved to be asked specifically about some of the things with the pandemic. I came up with some really great ideas for the kids still being able to have carpet time, for example. I wanted to use hula hoops or tape on the floor so that the kids could still be on the floor, so I could still read stories to them. And I was told that they couldn't sit on the floor because, germs, things like that. So us teachers were working really hard throughout the summer to think of really creative ideas to make sure that things could happen. I know a lot of us worked really hard to make lamination and different things so that kids could still have manipulatives to play with. and they told us that we couldn't use those because they couldn't be sanitized between each use and things like that. It was so over the top the way that they were with these things, and it was from Judy's leadership that she was listening to Karen Ramstrom the whole entire time.
You know what I find amazing is that the school system basically is a foundation of kids need to know the Constitution. People need to know the Constitution. The one thing that really struck me about you, Bryan, is you know the Constitution. Katie, I know you know the Constitution. And when you look at this type of thing, we talked about policy. And we've only got a few minutes here, but I want to talk maybe a little bit about policy after the break. And here's why. Because when you talk about policy, if policy is diametrically opposed to your constitutionally protected rights of the United States Constitution and the California Constitution, how can policy even exist in the school system?
Good question.
Yeah, excellent. One of the things that you've heard of the California School Boards Association, probably. One of the things that they do every few months is they send sometimes dozens and dozens of policies or prospective policies to each superintendent in the state. And with that superintendent, one of their jobs is to go through each one of those policies and decides, well, do we want to adopt this one? Do we not want to adopt this one? Do we want to adopt this one? Which ones do you take to your school board to adopt, and which ones do you delete? I could be perfectly honest with you. There are very few policies that I would get from the California School Board Association would I actually send to my school board to adopt, because most of them aren't written in a friendly manner that are going to be good for kids, good for teachers, or good for educators. A lot of the times they tie their hands. So that's not something, that's direct responsibility of the superintendent. And you've heard the ills going on with the California School Board Association, the National School Board Association, and the things that are going on there. We definitely don't want those things creeping into our school districts locally.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that, but I still really am excited that I think that we're actually going into new ground here. The understanding of our school system and our school boards, understanding that they're constitutionally protected. And I think no one stood up to that, because I mean, I don't know whether Judy Flores, is that her name?
Yeah.
If she's even read the Constitution, because obviously she doesn't want to follow it. And
well, like you said, it's uncharted territory for us, because
everybody's
been locked out.
Policy.
So now that there's a potential for unlocking the door and getting good people in there to do that, we can expose what's really going on and get it cleaned up. It's no different than our county government. Truly, I mean, you've got to expose and clean things and get it going. All right.
Well, we're going to have to go off to our first break here, Travis. Anyway, we will come back with Bryan Caples and Katie Gorman right after this. Time has come.
For 51.
Let's get to that.
Amen.